So, you have a goal. Maybe it's a massive career pivot or a new fitness regimen or, I mean, just finally cleaning out the garage, right?
Yeah, we've all been there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for the first 3 days, you were just an absolute machine. You're unstoppable. But then by day 4 or maybe week 4, you are completely burned out. The drive it just evaporates.
Right, it's totally
And
gone.
you're sitting there staring at the wall, wondering why you can easily conquer certain mountains in your life, but totally collapse on others. And, we almost always treat this drop-off as a moral failing. Like, it's a sign that we just don't have the necessary grit.
Which is it's how we usually view persistence, right? As the static character trait. The assumption is pretty much that you either possess the innate strength to push through obstacles, or you are simply weak-willed.
Right.
But that assumption totally ignores the actual machinery behind human motivation.
And that is exactly our mission today. We are going to dissect the actual underlying mechanics of persistence. And we're not talking about some motivational poster about grinding.
No, definitely not.
We're looking at it as a literal system of energy and structure. So for this deep dive, we are exploring a really fascinating translated text from 2007 by Swifeng. It's titled A Brief Discussion on Willpower and Integrated, its connection with consciousness, structure, and energy.
That's quite a title.
It is,
Yeah.
but it totally reframes the conversation.
Yeah.
Because it treats willpower almost like mechanical engineering.
Yeah, it really does. And to grasp the framework, we actually have to look at the linguistic root first. So Swefeng starts by analyzing the Chinese term for willpower, which is yi zi.
Yeah.
And the concept only really makes sense when you split those two syllables apart.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because understanding the two halves of that word completely changes how we look at our own motivation.
Right. So in Chinese, yi consists of two highly distinct components. Yi signifies the aspiration, right? The desire or that initial spark.
Like the wand.
Exactly. And then Z represents the mental and psychological state. It's the sheer determination that is actually required to fulfill that aspiration. It's the follow-through.
And Xuefeng uses this very specific, almost fable-like analogy for this from the source. He talks about the desire to eat a ginseng food.
Oh, yeah, the ginseng fruit.
Right. So that initial craving, that sudden thought of like, oh, I want that fruit, that is pure yi. But the determination to actually go out, navigate the forest, search for it, figure out how to climb the tree, and follow through until you are actually taking a bite, that is yi.
It's the action part.
Exactly. If you think about New Year's resolutions, for example, January 1st is pure yi. You buy the gym membership, you get the new running shoes, you make the whole vision board.
You really want that ginseng fruit.
Right. You really want it. But a cold, rainy Tuesday morning in mid-February, that requires Z. And frankly, mid-February is where most of us realize we only ever had half the equation.
Right. And what's fascinating here is that having both yi and zi isn't just a mood. It's not a fleeting feeling. Xuefeng argues that willpower functions exactly like the laws of physics.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he says it is a measurable mechanical force.
So this is where we move from linguistics straight into a physics lesson.
Pretty much. The core of his argument is that willpower acts as potential energy. It's stored up, just sitting there dormant.
Okay.
And it only transforms into kinetic, energy-like actual movement and power in the real world when it's expressed through action. So he points to things like speech, behavior, prayer, and visualization as the specific actions that trigger this transformation.
Wait, so until you take a tangible action, your willpower is just sitting in storage.
Yeah.
It's completely hypothetical.
Exactly. Think of a massive dam holding back a river. Your willpower is that stored water. When it cascades down a spillway or when it's directed to drive a generator's turbines, that potential energy becomes kinetic.
Right, it turns into actual power.
Yes, and the sheer power generated by that turbine depends entirely on two mechanical factors. The capacity of the reservoir, meaning how much water is actually in there, and the hydraulic pressure.
Which is created by the height of the drop. Right?
Exactly. The height difference.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. Because if willpower is just a reservoir of potential energy, it begs a massive question. Why do some people seem to have a massive, deep reservoir with incredible hydraulic pressure, while other people have a shallow puddle that just dries up at the absolute first sign of a drought?
It's a great question.
Like, is the size of this reservoir something we were just born with? Is it genetic?
Xuefeng is actually extremely clear on this. The strength of your reservoir isn't a genetic lottery. It's entirely dependent on a completely different internal system, which is human consciousness.
So the mind builds the reservoir.
more specifically, the state of the mind. So, the strength of your willpower depends entirely on how ordered and lucid your consciousness is.
Ordered and lucid. I mean, that sounds incredibly profound. But what does an ordered consciousness actually look like in this framework?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture in the text, an ordered consciousness requires a comprehensive understanding of the mysteries of the universe, of time, of space, and of life itself.
That's a tall order.
It is. It requires a profound recognition of life's value and meaning. And when you possess that level of existential understanding, your consciousness achieves clarity. You can discern exactly what to do, what not to do, and critically, what to think or avoid thinking.
Okay, let me push back on this a bit, or at least, grind it down to the gears here.
Sure.
How does understanding the quote-unquote mysteries of time and space actually stop my willpower reservoir from drying up on a Thursday afternoon when I'm just trying to finish a spreadsheet?
Well, think about the mechanics of a leak. When you lack a broader perspective on your finite time or your place in the universe, your daily life is consumed by friction.
Oh, okay.
You get outraged by a minor slight at work. You doom scroll for 3 hours because you're anxious about things completely outside your control. And every single one of those moments is a crack in the dam.
Oh, wow. So you're just bleeding energy.
Exactly. Your potential energy bleeds out into useless kinetic energy. But when you have that profound cosmic clarity, you recognize those trivialities for what they are. You plug the leaks. The water only flows where you deliberately direct it.
So you essentially have this high-definition map of reality. You aren't guessing about what matters anymore, so every drop of water goes straight to the turbine. But without that map,
Without it, our consciousness becomes chaotic and bewildered. We completely lose sight of our ultimate purpose.
and Sufeng calls this being a headless fly, right? Aimlessly stumbling and crashing through life. Like, we are incredibly busy, we are moving fast, but we are achieving absolutely nothing. All of our kinetic energy is wasted in random directions.
Yeah, I think the headless fly state perfectly describes the default mode for a lot of people today.
I really struggle with this idea sometimes, though. Because if I'm
Yeah.
knocking out 50 emails a day, keeping up with the news cycle, and managing a packed calendar, I mean, I am achieving something, right? How is that chaotic? Doesn't the constant input of modern life, like the notifications, the endless choices, doesn't that actually force us to rely on brute force willpower just to survive the noise? Essentially, does all this overthinking and constant distraction drain the reservoir before we even start our actual work?
Yes, absolutely. That constant reactive input is the exact definition of a chaotic state, according to this text. You're reacting to external stimuli rather than directing your energy toward a coherent aspiration, a true you.
Right.
In a state of chaotic consciousness, your willpower might hold up perfectly fine during favorable sunny conditions. When the inbox is manageable and you've had a good night's sleep, the headless fly manages to fly straight.
Sure, when things are easy.
But the moment there's wind and rain, the moment a real disruption or hardship hits, that fragmented willpower completely collapses.
Because it wasn't anchored to anything structurally sound.
Right.
It was just a shallow puddle holding up a reflection, and a single raindrop shatters it.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so a deep understanding of your purpose leads to ironclad willpower. It makes logical sense in theory. But how does this hold up when real people are put through an actual psychological stress test?
Well, Savang actually provides a highly specific real-world case study to illustrate this exact stress test. He observed a spiritual group called Lifechanyuan.
Okay, and just to be clear for the listener, we're simply reporting the beliefs and examples outlined in the text here, right? We're looking at this as a psychological case study of willpower under pressure. We aren't endorsing any specific ideology.
Exactly, strictly as an observational case study. So regardless of their specific goals, like their desire to reach what they call the celestial islands continent of the Elysium world, from a purely psychological standpoint, it serves as a fascinating petri dish for watching human willpower crack.
Right.
And he divides the members into two distinct categories based on how they handle stress.
The resilient versus the fragile.
Correct. So the resilient followers maintain that ordered consciousness by actively focusing on the mysteries of time, space, and life. And because their internal map is so clear, their willpower becomes a vast, unshakable reservoir.
And the text vividly states that they would remain calm and resolute even if an atomic explosion went off beside them, right?
Yes, a bit hyperbolic with the atomic explosion maybe, but the point really lands. External chaos bounces off an internally ordered structure.
Okay, but what about the fragile followers?
Well, instead of seeking that profound internal understanding, they spend their time testing the waters, they observe, they gauge trends, they wait to see which way the wind is blowing.
Right.
They seek out supernatural powers, mystical arts, or they just look for opportunities to show off their own abilities to the group.
So they are entirely focused on the superficial. They want external validation instead of internal order.
Precisely. And this raises a really important psychological question. What happens to this fragile group when the wind and rain inevitably arrive?
Right, when the stress hits.
When they face setbacks, they abandon their original aspirations. They quit. But it's what they do after they quit that reveals the true mechanics of vanity.
Yeah, the text is brilliant on this point.
Mm-hmm.
Because when they quit, they don't just leave quietly. They actively turn around and slander Lifechanyuan to justify their departure.
Yes, they look for any opportunity to attack the structure they just abandoned.
And the psychological mechanism he identifies here is so universal. Whether you're leaving a spiritual group or quitting a demanding job or abandoning a fitness goal, these individuals are desperately seeking validation for their failure.
Exactly.
They try to rally others to criticize the group because they believe that the more people who agree with them, the more correct their decision to quit appears to be. They're basically searching for an echo chamber.
They're trying to retroactively build a logical foundation for a decision that was actually just born out of weakness.
Yes. So what masquerades in our society as righteous anger or critical feedback is in reality often just vanity. It's human vanity acting as a loud, defensive cover-up for a weak, collapsed willpower. Like, you couldn't make the climb, so you try to convince everyone else that the mountain is stupid.
It's such a brilliant observation on how a chaotic consciousness protects its own ego.
Yeah.
When the reservoir runs dry, vanity steps in to pretend the water wasn't needed anyway.
Wow. Okay, so what does this all mean for us? We've established that a strong, ordered consciousness equals strong willpower. And willpower acts as the kinetic energy used to achieve a goal and push through the wind and rain without collapsing into vanity.
Right.
But that leads to the final and perhaps most challenging question. If willpower is just the kinetic energy used to achieve a goal, can that energy actually change who we are at our core? Like, can sheer willpower force us to evolve?
Xu draws a very hard line here. He says willpower is only energy. It is potential or kinetic energy, but it is not a structure.
Okay.
And because it is not a structure, it cannot alter structures.
There is a beautiful biological analogy for this in the text. The peony principle.
Yes, I love this one.
A peony flower remains a peony flower no matter how much water or fertilizer you give it. You can pump that plant full of the absolute best nutrients on Earth, which basically represents throwing endless willpower and energy at a situation, but the input does not change its fundamental botanical structure.
Right, it's never going to grow into an oak tree.
You just end up with a highly fertilized peony.
Exactly. And applying this to the human condition as described in the text, a person's life structure, their non-material essence, the core of who they are, cannot be altered simply by having ironclad willpower. You cannot white-knuckle your way into a new state of being.
Let me try an analogy here to lock this in.
Yeah.
It's like upgrading a car. Think of willpower as strapping a massive experimental rocket booster to the bumper of your vehicle.
Yeah.
You hit the ignition, and yes, you will definitely go faster. You will push through the wind and rain, blast through obstacles, and get down the road. But it doesn't change the fact that you are still driving a 1998 Honda Civic.
That is a great way to picture it. And that highly stressed Honda Civic is eventually going to blow a gasket.
Exactly.
According to Xu, the only way to actually rebuild that car into a Ferrari, to change the fundamental structure, requires a total transformation in your consciousness.
So only a transformation in consciousness can actually alter the non-material structure of a person.
Yes. That deep existential understanding we discussed earlier isn't just the water that fills the reservoir. It is the only thing capable of upgrading the dam itself.
But then, if willpower can actually change our structure, should we just abandon it as a useless force?
Not at all. That's the final balance the text strikes. Despite its inability to change structure, willpower remains absolutely essential.
Oh, so?
The text compares it to a ship. No matter how incredibly advanced, perfectly structured, or beautifully designed a ship is, even if you successfully transformed your consciousness into a pristine, ocean-faring vessel, it cannot leave the harbor without propulsion.
It'll just sit there, perfect but motionless.
Exactly. Willpower is that indispensable driving force. It is the kinetic energy that moves the structured vessel through the challenges and toward the destination.
Okay, let's pull all these threads together for you listening. Ye and Z. Your aspiration and your determination combine to create your reservoir of potential energy. To keep that reservoir full and to ensure you can survive the wind and rain without your willpower collapsing into an echo chamber of vanity, you need an ordered consciousness.
Right.
You need a deep, lucid understanding of your purpose and your place in the universe so you stop leaking energy on trivial friction. Willpower is the essential fuel that propels your ship forward, but your consciousness is the engine block itself. You cannot rebuild your structure with just fuel.
And it really invites you, the listener, to examine your own harbor. Look at your daily life and your long-term goals. Are you acting as an advanced ship, beautifully structured but sitting totally still in the water because you lack the proportion of willpower? Or are you the headless fly, burning through immense amounts of fuel and willpower with absolutely no ordered map of where you are actually going?
It's a heavy question.
Yeah.
And it brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with today, building right off that peony analogy.
Let's hear it.
We live in a modern culture that is utterly obsessed with grinding and hustling. We essentially glorify willpower above almost every other human trait. We wear our burnout like a badge of honor, proving to the world how much kinetic energy we expended today.
Oh, for sure.
But if we take this framework seriously, if willpower is ultimately just the fertilizer, and only a profound shift in consciousness can actually change your fundamental structure, perhaps we should spend a little less time forcing ourselves to act and a little more time sitting still to understand why we're acting at all.
That's powerful.
Otherwise, we really have to ask ourselves, are we just exhausting ourselves, trying to be a completely different kind of flower while remaining a peony all along? Take some time to check your reservoir. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.